Good evening, everybody. My name is Kate O'Connor, and I'm chair of the Vermont Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. And I want to call our Thursday, June 22nd, 2017 meeting to order. And our first order of business is going to introduce all the panel members to you. So we'll start, David, on your end.
David Andrews, representing the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the current and former employees of Vermont Yankee.
Mike McKinney, representing Entergy.
Good evening, I'm Jack Boyle. I'm the Decommissioning Director at Vermont Yankee, representing Entergy.
Good morning, Peter Walk, the Deputy Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources.
Good evening, June Tierney, the Commissioner of the Department of Public Service, Deputy Secretary Walk meant evening, not morning.
One of those days.
Martin Langeveld, citizen member of the panel.
Katie Buckley, Commissioner of Housing Community Development, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
Bill Irwin, the Vermont Department of Health, representing the Agency of Human Services.
Chris Campen, Executive Director, Wyndham Regional Commission.
Mark McDonnell, representing the Vermont Senate.
David Dean, citizen appointee, appointed by the Speaker of the House.
Steve Skibniowski, representing the town of Vernon.
Thank you, everybody. As you can see,
Kate,
I'm sorry. I was told not to forget you, but I did. We have, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Bob.
Yeah, my name is Robert Gustafson, and I'm the replacement for Diane Becker as a representative of the state of New Hampshire, Homeland Security, Emergency Management.
Great. Thank you. And if you ever have a time that you want to say something, just yell real loud. I don't want to forget you.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Diane Becker has left our panel because she's retiring from state government. It's not that she doesn't want to be with us anymore. She's going to happier places. For the agenda this evening, we're going to do the decommissioning updates from Entergy and the state of Vermont. And then we have representatives from AREVA and Burns and McDonnell here tonight to give us an overview of what their role will be in the decommissioning effort and what they do now, and just an overview so we can get a better understanding of who they are and what they're going to be doing. First up, I need to see if everybody wants to approve the minutes of the March meeting and the May meeting. First, if anyone has any comments, corrections.
So moved.
Oh. So we have a motion which has been seconded to approve the minutes of the Thursday, March 23rd, 2017 meeting and the May 25th, 2017 meeting. All those in favor of that motion, please say aye. 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 Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstaining? All right, the motion passes. Is Joe Lynch here? Oh, good. Yes, Joe's hiding. This room setup is a little different, so we're learning as we go. But we'll start with our update from Entergy on the decommissioning activities at Vermont Yankee.
Thank you, Kate. First, I want to welcome everybody to the Governor Hunt House at Vermont Yankee, and not typical of my presentations to start off with a Stacey moment, but since you're at the site, I'm inclined to do so. So a couple things. First of all, being in this building and somewhat unfamiliar with its layout, we do have bathrooms in the other room up the ramp on the right-hand side. We have emergency exits here in the back, so in the event that we have an emergency, please use either this door or that door and move towards the lawn. Recognizing that we're in kind of a small parking area and that by the end of the meeting, we will likely be in darkness, we've included some additional lighting for folks. And one of the things that's not an option here at the site is the use of handrails as you're ascending and descending down stairways. So please use handrails when you're exiting or leaving our facility tonight for your own safety. Obviously, we want to make sure everybody leaves very safely. Any questions during the meeting, please find me during the break. But welcome to the Governor Hunt House, and we're glad that we had the opportunity to host a meeting this evening. Move up 3 slides, please. Okay, first I'll start off with really the big major project that's ongoing at the site, and that is the dry fuel storage project. Since the last time we met, we have made fairly significant progress with the construction of the second ISPAC pad. We started that work back on March 13th, once the weather cleared, and we completed the concrete placement for the second pad on June 1st, and right now we're focused on getting ready to pour what is known as the apron and ramp. So that's the access leading up to the pad and connecting to the first pad. Those will be accomplished over the next couple months. The second major milestone is that we did start the cask loading campaign for 2017. That was started on June 11th. We did complete the first cask last week, and we're in the process of loading the second cask. As mentioned at the previous meetings, our goal is to have all fuel transferred by the end of 2018. We had put out some projections of what our annual output would be. At this point, we're just going to continue to do that safely, and we'll report on our progress at future meetings. But we have now 44 additional casks to be completed by the end of 2018. And that's pending NRC approvals. There are some NRC decisions that have to be made to allow us to move the fuel sooner. And I believe at the September 28th NDCAP meeting, we'll have Holtec here to talk further about the technology changes and some of the things that has gone on with the project. So we'll have that to look forward to in a couple months. Next slide, please. A couple of photographs. Upper right, you can see the folks at the site are in the process of pouring the concrete for the second ISPAC pad, and then the picture in the lower section has the pad completely poured, putting a cover on it while it cures. That's a couple weeks back, and now they're working on, again, that access ramp and apron leading up to the new pad. Next slide, please. Quick water management update. Again, our water, intrusion water retention, ship, and removal continues to be implemented. We are still looking at opportunities to seal leakages in the lower part of the turbine building. There is one area that we're focused on that we're putting into our schedule that has to be coordinated with some other work, and we believe that will further reduce the in leakage. These days, we're about 650, 675 gallons a day, which is historically low for this time of the year, and has shown that the efforts that we've made over the past year or so have seen a significant reduction in the intrusion rate. We have been shipping this water to Entergy Solutions at their disposal site in Tennessee. We're about 3 shipments per month. As you recall, we've had points and times where we've been shipping a couple per week, but we've reduced that significantly. And up to date, we have 536,000 gallons shipped to Entergy Solutions to date. Next slide, please. One of the things that is a recent and new project that I wanted to make the panel and the public aware of is something that was planned to occur right after we complete the fuel transfer, but in anticipation of approvals both from the state and the NRC, we've started this project. And this is essentially a reduction in our site protected area. So if you were to look at the site right now, we have a very robust security barrier around the entire site, including the industrial footprint. But after we have completed the fuel transfer to the first and second pad, we're going to be able to reduce that area to what is known as the ISPAC, or Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation protected area. That shrinking of the footprint will allow us to focus on really where all of the security issues are, and that's the storage of fuel. We'll be putting in a new vehicle barrier system, a perimeter and security fence around there. There'll be camera lighting, and then we'll have one small building called a central alarm station where security will have all of the alarms reporting back to that area as we oversee the fuel. The 2 primary benefits of reducing the protected area is, one, It'll allow access to the decommissioning areas of the site that are outside of the protected area. So currently, any vehicle going into the site, even if it's a truck bringing in material, has to go through a security search. So this obviously slows down the process of getting vehicles into the site. Once all the fuel's on the pad and we can reduce the protected area footprint, we'll be able to minimize that security footprint, so that obviously makes decommissioning a little easier. And then the real benefit is cost reductions that will optimize our withdrawals from the trust. Once this is done, we'll be saving about $1.2 million per month. So a particularly important milestone. This was scheduled to occur in 2020 when we had moved the fuel. Now we need to move it up to 2018 because that's our new target for having fuel on the pad. So this has been our plan all along. In order to accomplish this, we need to seek approval from the NRC to modify our security plan, and we also need Public Service Board approval to amend the original docket 8300 that installed the fence system around the site. And in that docket, we had stated that we would be doing this reduction at some point in the future, and the future is now coming up in about a year and a half. We're targeting at least the initial start of the construction this fall. We've requested approval from the Public Service Board around the August 31st date in order to make this happen, and we're going through that process of seeking that right now. The board did order recently that June 29th will be the deadline for any parties to submit any comments on our application or request a hearing. So we'll wait for that date to see what we have to do to complete that particular activity. Next slide, please. Next slide. Couple updates on where we stand with the transaction. As you know, we need both Public Service Board and NRC approval to go forward with the transaction. One of the things I reported at the last meeting that was essentially a delay in the proceedings was the treatment of what are known as confidential and highly confidential documents. A number of documents needed special treatment before they could be shared with those parties that were intervening. That's now been worked out and addressed by the Public Service Board. So those documents, many thousands of them, have been made available to those who are parties to the proceedings, and they're looking at those. And what that did was it required an additional time period for certain petitioners, including the Department of Public Service, the Agency for Natural Resources, and New England Coalition, to review those and provide their second round of discovery requests. That is due on June 22nd. And because of that delay, which was about 6 weeks, the entire schedule needs to be revised. So we're in the process of negotiating with parties to establish new milestones for the schedule. So by the next meeting, we'll know what those milestones are. One of the things that is coming up that we believe will be preserved with the schedule is the second public hearing, which will likely be located here in Vernon. That was targeted for September 5th or 6th on the original schedule. We'll see with what the new scheduling order looks like, but that will be another opportunity for the public to come in, get an update on where we stand with the proceedings, and make any comments or ask any questions of the petitioners. A couple other things. The Public Service Board now has a new chair, Mr. Anthony Roisman, that was appointed on June 12th. Mr. Roisman, due to activities associated with Vermont Yankee in the past, has recused himself and will not be participating in docket 8880, but important that the Public Service Board is now at full staff. And then finally, we're working through a number of issues. One was a motion by the New England Coalition for partial summary judgment on certain orders that dated back to some earlier dockets. That has now been fully briefed and is before the board for their decision. So lots going on, obviously, with the Public Service Board activities. Next slide, please. As far as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's license transfer application that we had submitted back in February, as everybody remembers, the last NDCAP on May 25th was attended by the NRC so they could present their process and listen and seek public input and comment. So that milestone has been accomplished. Recently, the state of Vermont did file a request for hearings with two contentions, and I won't read them, but they involve environmental hazards and an environmental report. So that is before the NRC. The New England Coalition, it requested an extension for time to evaluate whether they want to request and file a hearing. That was granted, so June 27th is the new date for that. And then we have an opportunity to file an answer by July 10th. So lots of activities going on with the NRC license transfer process and approval. Next slide, please. And the next slide. As far as the Nuclear Decommissioning Trust Fund, at the end of April, I'd reported at the last meeting we had a balance of $570 million. At the end of May, we're now at 571.5. That increase was due to favorable market performance, partially offset by the reimbursements that we took from the trust and any fund expenses. So far in 2017, we have made $15 million in qualified withdrawals. We have seen $25.1 million in market gains, and we've paid about $1.5 million in fund expenses. The second trust, the Site Restoration Trust, is at $23.8 million. That is as at the end of May 31st. We've funded that to date to $20 million, so we've seen $3.8 million in growth. And the final $5 million payment to the Site Restoration Trust is on schedule for December of this year. Next slide. And then lastly, of course, we continue with our open communication and transparency through our outreach efforts here through the panel. We continue to do speaking engagements in the public, interface with the media. You've seen a lot of local advertising, and we continue with our employees being involved in the community, something that we'll continue to be involved and very proud of. We are doing tours with key stakeholders. They are informed by what's going on at the site, and there's a lot of activity right now, but to the best of our ability, we try to get tours done. Most recently, they've been what we call exterior tours, where we could get folks on site, but can't necessarily get them into the protected area while certain activities are going on. And I believe that is the last slide. And I'll take any questions you might have.
We're going to hold questions for two more things, Joe. Then we're going to package it all together and do questions. Normally, Tony Luzinski would be giving us an update on the decommissioning activities. But instead, as Joe mentioned, the state of Vermont has filed a request for a public hearing on the license transfer amendment that the NRC is considering. So what I've done is asked Commissioner Tierney and Dr. Irwin on behalf of the state to sort of take a couple of minutes and explain what that request is all about, why the state did it, and just fill us in on it a little bit.
Thank you, Kate. Jim, I don't recall, have we said you would do this or I will do this?
I just made it up that you were going to do it. So.
I understand. and I'm not falling into your makeup.
I was just going to give a brief.
I thought you would.
Update, and then I'm probably going to look from the AG's office actually to address your
Perfect.
Yeah, because we're going to have we want a separate update on this certificate of public good process.
Indeed. So these two gentlemen will be doing the update. Jim, go ahead. You're up.
So I'm Jim, can you hear me? Jim Porter with the Department of Public Service. I'm the Director for Public Advocacy, which means I oversee the legal division. And so to give you an update on the CPG case, I think you've met Steph Hoffman from our office before. She does all the work and has most of the knowledge about this. So I'm going to give you a very brief update. She's on a much-deserved vacation this week. As you saw earlier, there have been some issues with certain confidential documents and super secret confidential documents that has somewhat derailed the process as far as the schedule goes. I think all of that has now been worked out. You've heard a little bit about the schedule where basically we are engaging in discovery with the company. However, our schedule is being retooled, and as to when the public hearing will be, I don't disagree. September, we think that it's likely that the technical hearings will be in late 2017 or early 2018. Just an interesting note that you may be familiar with, but Waste Control Specialist, the low-level nuclear waste repository, has been seeking to merge with a company you heard about tonight, Entergy Solutions. And I believe that is a part of NorthStar's plan insofar as there's waste that would go to that facility. Just an interesting thing that has occurred is during this merger, Waste Control Specialist testified that this merger with Entergy Solutions was basically necessary for its financial survival. As you know, the Department of Justice brought an action in a federal court yesterday, blocked the merger. So don't exactly know what that's going to mean at this point. There's still an appeal period, but it is an interesting development, I think, insofar as the CPG case goes. And I'm going to defer to Rob McDougall from the AG's office to talk about the NRC proceeding.
Hi, I'm Rob McDougall. I'm the Environmental Protection Division Chief at the Attorney General's office. One of my attorneys, I think, has been to a number of these meetings before, Kyle Landis-Marinello. He's out of state tonight, and so I'm covering for him to update on these two filings that the state made last week at the NRC. The first filing the state made was a multi-state filing where we commented on the NRC's decommissioning rulemaking. The state of Vermont was joined in that filing by the states of Massachusetts, New York, and Connecticut, and our state agency partners, the Vermont Department of Public Service, the Vermont Department of Health, the Agency of Natural Resources, and the Department of Emergency Management. The key points in those comments were, first, we reiterated points that we had made in the multi-state filing a year ago with the same group of partners. Those being that we asked the NRC to give equal weight to the views of states and other stakeholders. The second point that we reiterated was to have the host states and their residents have more of a say, the states that are most affected by decommissioning. A few new points that were raised in the comments. One was that we want the 10-mile emergency planning zone to remain in place for as long as fuel is in a spent fuel pool. That is before it's transferred to dry cast. The rule as proposed would eliminate the zone within a year. We also raised a new point where we want the decommissioning fund protected for decommissioning expenses only. That is not spent fuel management and other financial assurances. The other last point of those comments was that we want the states to have a meaningful role in the review of the decommissioning plan. The second filing at the NRC last week, which we heard a little bit about already tonight, was the state's request for a hearing in the NRC's review of the sale of Vermont Yankee from Entergy to NorthStar. This was a joint filing we made with the Public Service Department with support from other state agencies, the Agency of Natural Resources and the Department of Health. Key points in this filing are that we're not saying that we oppose the transaction. The motion is really just a sign that we think we need more information. Getting a hearing at the NRC would allow for that review of more information. The two concerns that were raised, that were referenced already, the first is that we want to ensure that there's adequate protection for the public health, safety, and environment. And two, that we need to have the additional environmental review of the transaction and the new decommissioning plan. The timetable for the ruling on the motion to intervene would put us in a position where we expect to have briefing throughout the summer and probably get a ruling in September. If we win, we would get a hearing before the Atomic Safety and Licensing Board, which is a 3-member panel. If we don't, we would have an appeal right up through the DC circuit. Thanks.
So I prepared a number of slides, and I'm not going to be able to go through all of them tonight, but they will be available at the website so that you can take a look at them. It's a summary of the petition for leave to intervene and have a hearing request on the transfer of the license. And next slide, please. There are these two contentions. The first is really associated with financial assurance, and the second is associated with environmental review as required by the National Environmental Policy Act. You can read these contentions. There's a lot of reference here to the Code of Federal Regulations, which are the rules by which NRC licensees are to abide. That's why it's a bit complicated there. Next slide, please. So contention one is primarily based on the concerns the state has relative to financial assurance that the decommissioning would actually be completed and not leave the state of Vermont or others with a partially decommissioned facility. And as a parts of that, there are bases, including the long contended issue of spending up to $225 million of the decommissioning fund for spent fuel management. And there's also, as bases in there, a history of cost overruns during decommissioning. Next slide, please. And here are some of those incidents over the course of recent decommissioning here in New England. Strontium-90 contamination at Connecticut Yankee, highly contaminated groundwater at Maine Yankee, PCBs and paint at Yankee Row. These led to very significant cost overruns at those three plants. And then some analyses by the NRC and the Government Accounting Office that show that the history is that with estimates, they are not often good estimates, and that in fact there are many cases where overruns are predicted even in subsequent estimates, and that the possibilities of success in meeting the estimates is 1 in 3 chance at the best, and for the highest probability or the other probabilities as low as 1% success to meet those cost estimates. Next slide, please. There are a lot of other contentions that are described in the filing by the Joint Public Service Department and Attorney General's Office. These are more of those. I'm not going to go through each of them. But again, they are related to having sufficient funds through the entire process to license termination planning and site restoration in order to avoid a site that is only partially decontaminated. Next slide, please. There are references to a variety of other points of testimony besides 3 affidavits that are included in the filing. In particular, the costs associated with extensive and frankly possibly constant or continuous storage of spent fuel at the facility. And you can see some of those costs there, creating the first of its kind dry fuel transfer station, purchasing new casks, labor and material for the transfer. Currently, every 100 years, the licenses would expire and possibly need to transfer into new casks. And of course, maintaining the security of the site beyond 2052, which are this is an assumption in both the original PSDAR, post-shutdown decommissioning activity report, and the revised one filed by NorthStar. And next slide, please. The contention 2 is about the National Environmental Policy Act requirements to ensure that there is a full comprehensive review that gives, as you can see in the 3rd bullet, a hard look at the environmental consequences. Also that there are especially opportunities to look at the cumulative effect of numerous changes, and that is not adequately done. Next slide, please. The summary from our filing is that the NRC is not complied with NEPA or applicable NRC regulations to date. And you can see here it's because not analyzed for the potential environmental impacts, especially the shortfall in the decommissioning fund, which would put the public health and safety and the environment at risk. And as I mentioned, cumulative impacts and also a failure to evaluate reasonable alternatives, such as imposing license conditions requiring additional financial assurance beyond that which is proposed by NorthStar. Next slide, please. So there are 3 affidavits that are a part of that. Mine was one of those. We reiterated here some of what we had in the ASLB hearing that was successful last year, specifically that finances could be adversely impacted by groundwater contamination, soil that's contaminated by that groundwater, and especially from strontium-90, and that a full investigation and characterization of the Vermont Yankee site, both for radiological and non-radiological purposes, has not yet occurred. So it's really almost impossible to get a good cost estimate until you do that. Current regulations only require it at the end of the decommissioning process near license termination planning. That's woefully too late if you're trying to plan costs for something that might take 10 or up to 50 years to conduct. Next slide, please. Very helpful collection of means by which this shortfall could occur. It came in an affidavit by Warren Brewer, a 40-year nuclear engineer and consultant with specialization in decommissioning. And you can see the list of 8 different ways that shortfall could occur. And again, these result in real substantiation of the position that an environmental impact assessment needs to be done, and it needs to be more than what has been done. And then lastly, next slide please, that other sources of financial risk exist. And then finally, last slide is the affidavit of Chuck Schwer from the Department of Environmental Conservation, where they reiterate, based on more than 4,000 different facilities that they have remediated in the state of Vermont, that there's always a full site investigation and characterization, and that allows them to make a better assessment as to the uncertainty in the planning, as well as the financial assurance for the plans. And the Agency of Natural Resources is not able to determine at this time whether the work plan and related cost estimates are adequate, and more information is needed, as the Attorney General's office just described. And that's a summary of that affidavit as was asked of me by the chair to present. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to open up to panel questions now. So I don't know if anyone has questions for either Joe Lynch, Jim Porter, Rob McDougall, or Dr. Irwin. Yes.
So for Jim, on the scheduling, if there's been outreach to the parties, I'm not aware of that yet. And one of the things that we were talking about on scheduling the public hearing was having that after all the discovery has been filed, all the pre-filed testimony and all the rebuttal testimony, so that the public could be as informed as possible going into the technical hearings. So if everybody could just kind of keep that in mind, but again, hopefully when the parties are convened or solicited as far as their thoughts on the schedule going forward, I'll bring that up, but hopefully you guys can carry that water.
Oh, absolutely. We'll certainly reach out to you. And I'm hoping that both of us are going to speak at the public hearing so people can enjoy our accents.
Yes, sir.
But,
lots of y'all. I'm glad that it's great to see the state they're asking a lot of the questions I think a lot of folk are asking about the details of the proposed sale and how that's going to work. So, and it's good to see the thoughts of the experts coming in. So, Commissioner Tierney, thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I was going to suggest that maybe at our next meeting or soon, a meeting coming up soon, is if we could have an expert with geotechnical engineering expertise talk to us about what, under the proposed decommissioning conditions, what would that mean for redevelopment of the site as far as like having structure still being in place 4 feet underground, backfilling of pipes, rubblization. If we could have somebody with structural engineering, site engineering expertise talk about what that means, about what it would take to rebuild on that site. Because I know one of the questions around site restoration and decommissioning is, well, how will the site ultimately be reused? And have somebody actually come in and talk about the actual physical characteristics of that site after what NorthStar has proposed, that might give us some insight as to whether it's light industrial possibility, heavy industrial possibility, and just also if at least they could look at some of the characterizations that we already have of the site, what it would mean for continued movement of groundwater and that kind of thing after everything would be said and done. So, Madam Chair, I would just like to suggest that might be another item on the agenda. And one last thing.
Wait, you gotta stop.
Oh.
'Cause what I want to say to you, Chris, is those sound like great ideas, and you speak faster than I can write. So could I impose on you, my apologies, could you send me an email that summarizes what you just said?
I'll send it to the panel, sure.
That'd be beautiful, and then we'll do what we can to meet the request.
And the one last thing is on the confidentiality agreement. I know Wyndham Regional Commission, just so folk know, we didn't sign onto the confidentiality agreement, the standard one or the super secret.
So the standard one, that's one thing. The super secret one actually has not been finalized,
Right.
so you couldn't have signed on to that.
But we couldn't because we have town appointed commissioners. We don't have a structure in place to keep information confidential, and so we're relying heavily upon the state agencies and the other parties too, frankly, who are signed on to that agreement, to be able to kind of share their perspectives on what they're seeing, especially if it relates to whatever conclusions they draw about.
Chris, just to be clear, when you say share their perspectives, you mean in the case that we put on, or do you mean share them with you here or in another form? What I'm getting at is, to the extent that parties are signatories to any confidentiality agreement, they're necessarily limited by that
Right.
agreement. I'm sure you understand.
But I'm talking. So
I'm just trying to get clear on what it is what the
So-
ask is.
as far as like what the state will be able to say to the public, and in our case, we're a party to the docket, and we're members of INDICAP, but because we're not signing a confidentiality agreement, we're like anybody else in the public as far as what
Understood.
So what I would ask is, I don't know where the negotiations are, the understanding, but my hope is that the nature of that standard agreement at least will enable you guys to talk about at least some of the basis at which you arrive at whatever conclusions you arrive at. And if there's some information, and I don't mean getting into the nitty gritty of of heavily protected information, but if you, the question I've had is like, will you even be able to talk generally about looking at the formulas broadly? Yes, it seems to pencil out, or no, it doesn't seem to pencil out. I just hope you'll be able to, instead of just kind of come to us and say, trust us, it works, or trust us, it doesn't work, that you'll be able to provide some kind of substantive critique of what it is a substantive overview of what you saw in those documents that led you to arrive at whatever conclusion you may arrive at. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm getting a little nervous, and I'm not happy to be nervous because it's not pleasant to have to say things like, we can't discuss important things that are subject to a confidentiality seal. That doesn't feel transparent. It does not feel good or responsive to your concerns. In my experience in Public Service Board proceedings, for instance, and I think you're aware of this, if something has been treated in discovery as confidential, It means the people who've signed the confidentiality agreement cannot discuss that. Now, parties do file testimony that goes to their ultimate conclusions, and they will file that testimony as publicly as possible. They will redact those things, meaning cross out, black out those things that are absolutely confidential. But to the fullest extent possible that they're able to, they both file their testimony and give live testimony openly. But there do come moments where, if it is relevant, if it is topical, if it is salient to the proceeding, that something confidential be discussed. That is done, not within your view,
Right.
unfortunately, and we're not in a position to share that with you then. So then, when you get past the discovery piece, and if there's a party that wants to keep something that was treated as confidential in discovery, if they want to actually make that confidential in the evidentiary record, they have to file a motion with the board to get permission to do that. And then argument is had at that time about whether the information actually qualifies for confidential treatment in the public record and in the evidentiary record. Until we know the rulings, if there are any on that point, I have to, in good faith, say to you tonight, I can't be sure of what we can discuss with you or not. So there is an element here of, if you are not a signatory to those agreements, whether it's the standard one or whatever the special protocol is that comes up, it is possible that we will not be able to share that with you. That is the practice in the board, and it doesn't give me comfort to say that to you. Mr. Porter, did you want to add something?
Well, I just wanted to try to clarify with Chris, because what I thought I heard Chris asking was there's some confidential information upon which our case or our testimony will be based. And I thought I heard you asking that, to the extent possible, that our case and testimony will be as comprehensive to those who don't have that. And as the commissioner said, absolutely, we will make every effort to do that. And the absolute least amount of things can be literally blacked out of it, but typically I don't think that will be a problem. I think you'll be pleased with the amount of information that comes with our testimony.
And I'm raising not just, I'm wearing my Wyndham Regional Commission hat, but I'm also speaking for the panel. We're there to advise state agencies, and so ultimately the panel may have questions too. So
You're speaking as a member of the panel, right? Not for the panel. Okay.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I've been real clear about that. I hope I'm still being clear about that. But so that's why I just want to make sure. And I'm assuming Commissioner.
June's fine.
To what you were saying.
AU works too.
So to what you were speaking about earlier about the board making a decision about what must be held confidential or not, it's those who are parties who actually see that information, they're the ones making the argument pro or con to the board, right?
That's correct.
So I would just also publicly asking that those parties be aware that it just seems like there's going to be some important information in that confidential documentation that answers some of the questions that Bill was addressing about to what extent the guarantees and the model that NorthStar is using to get this done. Just I know you will, but I'm just saying, just keep in mind that we need to, we're relying on you guys to be able to share with us as much as you can about your decision-making calculus to arrive at whatever conclusion.
Oh, yes. No, it's share as much as we can. And I am in the position of also having to say, as the representatives of the public interest, we have what I consider to be a sacred trust vis-a-vis the people we represent, you being among them, and the members of this panel, to use our best judgment in making that case. I regret that not all of it can necessarily be said openly, but those are the limits of the environment that we're dealing with. I would say this to you as well. You're an astute observer, and I think I spoke to this a couple meetings ago about how it's the common sense that is so helpful that this panel can offer. While we may not be able to necessarily disclose the super secret or super allegedly secret information, that doesn't mean that you can't share your observations with us about what you're seeing from what is available to you, so that we can have the benefit of those observations as we sketch out and then ultimately articulate our positions. So I would want to be very clear with every member of this panel that the department welcomes that input.
As a member of the panel, I want to urge all of the state agencies to resist withholding information about a critical element of success or failure in terms of what's being presented to the state in terms of the transfer of the license and the plan for decommissioning. I can't go further than that. I might, if I thought we had a chance, snowball's chance in hot places of passing a request out of NDCAP expressing those sentiments, I would make a motion to do so. But I don't believe we've had the proper backgrounding on that. At some point in this meeting, Madam Chair, I would like to see the Issues Committee take up that question so that, in fact, we have a full-blown discussion here in terms of resist categorizing information as private or secret or whatever you want to call it. And as Chris has said, whatever you can, in whatever form you can, make all that's available to us. And I don't mean just us as NDCAP, I mean that, but in terms of the people of the state. Thank you.
I was impressed and unable to keep up with the questions in Dr. Irwin's list, and I wonder what the plan is to require that the applicants answer and address those, and that there's be some way to monetize them. I've also been listening to radio commercials with no attribution that make many representations about NorthStar's background, its experience, and things that I disagree with as being, I think, are factually misleading. And I just wondered who was picking up the tab for that and why they thought that that was helpful in this process of trying to get to a reasonable cleanup that where everybody knows where the money is, what has to be done, and the consequences of transferring ownership. So, you know who's running those ads?
I think Joe Lynch answered that before, and I don't know if you want to answer it again, Joe.
I did address it in the past. There are a number of ad campaigns, including radio ads, that have been put together by the team, Entergy and NorthStar. And I guess if your question is how it's being funded, it's not being funded from the trust. So I'm not sure if there's anything else I need to eliminate, but those are the facts.
He's being paid for by NorthStar, or are they being paid for by New Orleans? Are they being paid for by Brattleboro, VY Brattleboro? Or if they're surprised that there was no indication of who's alleging the things said to be factual.
Well, I can assure you they're factual, but I can tell you that they're not being funded by the trust. Entergy and NorthStar, I'm sure, both have budgets for doing advertising on an annual basis for whatever the reason is. But I think to get down to what you're really asking is whether the money's coming out of the trust, and the answer is no.
That's not what I'm asking. I want to know who's paying for it. I didn't want to know where it's not coming from. I want to know who's paying for it and why.
It's part of an ad campaign to get information out regarding the transaction, and is being paid for by a combination of Entergy and NorthStar.
Entergy New Orleans?
by Entergy Corporation. I don't know if it's New Orleans or any of our other facilities. It really doesn't matter. It's being paid for by Entergy.
I'm persuaded that you believe it doesn't matter. I would like to know, and perhaps the public would like to know, who is paying for the ads that represent a variety of issues as being factual on the radio. And if you don't want to tell us that, tell us it's none of our damn business.
It's being paid for by Entergy Corporation. I'm not sure I can tell you any more than that.
Because you don't know or because you've been instructed not to tell us?
I think it's clear that it's being paid for by Entergy. Whether it's coming from New Orleans or New York or Mississippi, I think is irrelevant. We have a budget, we have a department that does advertising, it's being funded by that. If you'd like to know the specific details, I'll be reporting at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Now, one of your questions was Bill's slides and who was going to answer all of those questions. Was that one of your questions?
Yes.
I'm wondering if Rob, or do you want to, if you can get the mic and just explain what the process is.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for getting me back on topic.
The questions that were presented by Dr. Irwin on his slides are all the bases that we have used to ask for a hearing at the NRC. So if we are granted a hearing, we will get to investigate further into all of those questions, get more information, compile a record, and present that at a hearing. So that's the hope. We hope we get to answer the questions. We're asking for an opportunity to have a hearing. If we get a hearing, we'll get to have more information compiled and hopefully get some answers to those. There'll be a briefing schedule all summer, and we'll get a ruling probably in September as to whether or not we get that hearing.
I would hope that the questions would be submitted to the NRC before they show up for the hearing, rather than have us a repeat of what often happens where we ask them a bunch of questions and they say, well, we don't know, we'll get back to you, or that's speculative.
These questions were presented in the filing we made last week. So there's 3 affidavits and a long motion that goes with that. So they're all in front of the NRC now as a basis for our request for a hearing.
Not only a good list of questions, but they're being dispatched in a timely fashion.
I should also mention that both of the filings at the NRC last week are available on the Attorney General's website. We have a press release page. A press release from June 15th has a link to both of the filings I discussed earlier.
Great. We can send that. We can send that link around and maybe even put it on the. Oh, it's on the NDCAP site on the Public Service Department site as well. Yes, Steve.
Yes, Madam Chair, Steve Skibnowski here. I think it would be helpful for some of us on the panel, probably not everybody, but certainly for me in the future, if we have something complicated like Dr. Irwin just presented, that some kind of handout would be really helpful. I had to turn around because my neck was going solid here, and I couldn't write fast enough, so it would be helpful for some of us to understand.
I'll take the blame because I literally asked these people to do this at the last second. Otherwise,
I'm not blaming anyone, I'm just asking in future.
Madam Chair, just for clarity, the hearing that you're talking about for the NRC, that's likely to, that's not like a, you're not asking for like a public hearing here, that would be probably likely a hearing up in Maryland?
It'd be before the Atomic Safety and Licensing Board. Yep.
Okay.
So it's not a public hearing, it's an adjudication.
correct.
Okay, that's a big difference. Yeah.
It's super official in layman's terms. Does anyone else on the panel have any questions?
If I could, I'd like to follow up on it. Okay, the NRC says, nope, no hearing. How is it we get the information that gives us a response to your questions? Because you said that the decommissioning plan, et cetera, raised questions in your mind, corporate your mind. Dr. Irwin has, in his corporate mind, on Department of Health platform, has questions. How do we get the answers if there's no NRC hearing? Could it become part of the Public Service Board proceeding?
Separate tracks, separate issues
Understood.
raised in both. So, you know, the concerns about the decommissioning ability to decommission are gonna be raised at both. If we don't get the hearing granted, then we would have a path of appeal up to the DC Circuit to continue that road and hopefully get a different forum to take a different view if we're denied on the first step. So we can play that out the whole appellate string if we don't get the answer we want in the first time, sorry.
Yeah, that keeps you on the record.
And, you know, the questions of Dr. Irwin, we're the same. He's filed an affidavit in support of the motion we filed, so his questions are my questions, and we're on the same team. So-
Yeah, no, understood,
Okay.
but if you lose that forum at the NRC.
Right. We can go up to the DC Circuit.
Where is it that we have
Could I add
corporate,
something to
we
that?
have the ability to do discovery, to get answers to the questions that we have?
I think I should add too that the Department of Public Service is on that team as well.
Oh,
sorry.
We actually joined in the filing
And so's A&R,
participated
yeah.
in preparing it. So I can assure you that we're actively pursuing it in the federal venue, but we have no expectation of abandoning it simply because the NRC decides that they're not going to hold a hearing. The question's going to be the extent to which those issues are germane to what is before the Public Service Board. And it would be irresponsible of me tonight to represent to you carte blanche that everything we're doing at the NRC would necessarily translate to what we're doing here. I would reserve a more specific answer on that, Representative Dean, until the two attorneys who are actually dealing with this are on hand to give you more specific answers. But I think at a 10,000-foot level, you should have every assurance that discovery that we're conducting is quite robust.
And in terms of my interest,
And that Dr. Irwin's working
terms
for us.
of the river and the environment in this area.
Yes.
And maybe this is a rhetorical question for this meeting, and maybe you could be prepared to answer it, either you or Peter. There was an agreement signed between the Agency of Natural Resources, I believe, the Public Service Board, and Entergy. The department, right. Is that sort of the benchmark against which the proceeding in front of our Public Service Board is going on now? And as I say, I realize that question is coming to me as part of this discussion, but that was the hook that a lot of us settled for in terms of signing off, both individually and institutionally, on the closing down of the plant and the working out of all the arrangements. So I'm hoping that that agreement is quote-unquote ironclad.
So here's how I would approach answering that question for tonight's purposes. I'm going to go back a little ways here. The litigation that is underway is robust. As you heard a moment ago from Mr. McDougall and Mr. Porter, and I think from Dr. Irwin as well, there has been process right now before the board around the terms of discovery for the super secret stuff. That process has occasioned a delay in the case. So there is time in the case, which means that there is time for this panel to reconvene and for the attorneys who can give you more granular answers to be on hand to give you what I'm going to also call more responsible answers. Being a careful person myself and having spent quite a bit of time writing you a very detailed letter, responding to your questions, I'm glad to do it, and glad to write more of those letters if I have to earn your confidence. I will say this. To the extent that there are agreements that exist, agreements that folks like you relied on, it seems to me pretty clear that a transaction is not going to go down without there being an accounting for how those agreements are respected. Whether those agreements form part of this transaction or not, I cannot tell you without looking at them, refreshing my recollection, etc. But what I can do is assure you that they will not be forgotten. There is a motion pending right now that is about the issue of what exactly is the scope of this case. Does it require a reopening of an old case or not? I don't know whether your MOU falls within that one off the top of my head right now, Representative Dean, but I'm quite sure that the attorneys working on the matter can answer that question. This too is another example, as I was speaking with Mr. Campany earlier, or Chris, but you're always Representative Dean to me. This is a good example of how you might send us an email where you detail your concerns so that I'm not in the position of giving you irresponsible answers tonight.
Okay, I realize yeah.
We can
And by the way, if I could just complete that, I want to thank the commissioner. I did write an extremely detailed letter.
It was kind of mean, too.
Well, I was using discovery and...
Well, you said some pretty not nice things about us.
I questioned.
In a not nice way.
For all of my shortcomings...
You have none in my eyes.
The commissioner's response was professional, and as far as I've gotten in terms of reviewing the response, which I received yesterday, and of course I was meeting yesterday in the legislature, it has been thorough, at least by the titles of the appendix attachments. So,
Yeah, that's the least of what we owe you, sir. I'm glad to do it.
and so I want to thank you publicly for that.
I've got a couple of, based on, yes, I want to move on in just a second.
Can this panel expect if NorthStar were to acquire Vermont Yankee, that NorthStar will hold Vermont Yankee as a separate and distinct limited liability corporation, much in the same way that Entergy, when it purchased the plant, Entergy New Orleans was not the owner and operator. It was separated into a separate LLC, which was. Can we expect the same situation? As a member of this panel, I have a lot of questions I want to ask, but I want to know what a moment ago we had a gentleman who was speaking to us, and we didn't know which of the two Entergys he worked for, and which of the two Entergy the money was coming from. Are we going to can we expect the same sort of corporate structure? And if so, I would like to ask some questions about how that corporate structure would operate, so we don't fall into some of the same problems that we fell into when we found out that Vermont Yankee Brattleboro was separate, distinct, and insulated from the deep pockets in New Orleans.
I mean, I don't know if you want to answer that. I mean, we had the CEO.
I have to ride home with Senator McDonnell, so I'd better try to answer that.
Yeah, you better try to, because I was saying we had the CEO from NorthStar here, and that question was answered. I don't know if we can answer it anymore.
I know that I cannot. I know that I do not command the details of the litigation to that degree, nor should I. I'm trying to think, Senator, what the best way is to get you an answer to that, and I don't have good thoughts at the moment. I hesitate to ask you to join my follow-up email crew, but I think we would benefit from having your question memorialized so that I can think hard about how to instruct the attorneys so that they can get you an answer.
Yeah. And I'm keeping track of these questions as well, and if we'll see how many answers we can get, or people to come and answer these questions at the next meeting.
I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that we're not asking questions about the corporate structure and the holding structures that are likely to obtain, but I just, you've known me for years. I am not going to tell you something that I can't be sure is true.
Is that okay?
Well, look, those of us in the legislature after the purchase agreement back in 2000, it was years later that bits and pieces came out about corporate structure and the representation of the sale, the original sale of Yankee, turned out to be inaccurate. And it took years to sort of get those facts out. And we would hope that in the next, if there's another sale, that we know up front what's going on, who owns what, and whose pockets are
I
our
think what
funding and
you're asking,
whose pockets are insulated and
did we learn
who's
our
speaking
lessons?
for whom. And
Is what you're asking. Did we learn anything from the past, and do we
maybe
plan?
there'd be a radio ad that'll come on and explain all that stuff so the public will know it and we don't have to ask it, but I'm not gonna hold my breath.
Joe, I think that was an ask. Where are you? Did you leave, Mr. Flynn?
I would say this topic's been covered at previous discussions with Scott State, the CEO of NorthStar, and with Entergy back in December, January, and most recently at the NRC meeting. So I think if there is another question or there's unclarity as to how the corporate structures are set up, we should bring it up at a future meeting. Certainly, I'm not in a position to talk intelligently about what NorthStar has worked out as part of the deal, but it has been presented in many forms.
But no one here is prepared to explain what has already been presented in a way that those of us that are here can understand.
No, there's there's no NorthStar representative here to speak to that issue. And the state is not prepared to give us an answer because I think June's right, you don't want to say something that's not accurate. But we can put it.
It's unfortunate, but the attorneys who might be able to help us are simply not here tonight.
Yeah, and we can make sure we can get them at the September meeting.
Thank you very much. I want to take 5 years to find out what we may or may not do, the way it took 5 years the last time.
One last question from David.
Just a quick clarifying comment. I work for Entergy. The main, this is directed to you, Senator. The main corporation is Entergy. They happen to be located in New Orleans. But if we're talking about subsidiaries, and we want to make sure we're being clear, Entergy New Orleans used to be Gulf State Power, and it's a local distribution and retail part of the corporation. It has nothing to do with the nuclear side of Entergy. We don't talk about Green Mountain Power Montreal or IBM New York, or so. I think for clarity, it would be good if we're talking about the mothership of Entergy, it's Entergy. But that sometime back, that phrase just got into our language here of Entergy New Orleans. And it's just a point of clarification here. Entergy New Orleans has nothing to do with the nuclear side of Entergy
That's
Corporation.
totally my error.
Well,
Somebody down that way owns this plant as a wholly owned subsidiary.
Entergy Corporation.
Energy Corporation. I will try to use that lingo. Thank you.
And everybody's fallen into the trap.
All right, thank you, everybody. And I have kept notes, and we'll recap at the end of the meeting to make sure we all know what we want to do at the next meeting. Now I want to introduce Fred Bailey, who represents AREVA, and he's going to talk to us about the company and what they're going to do as partners with NorthStar. And Fred, I don't know if you want to give us just a little bit of what your background is and what your role in the company is, and
yes, well,
that would help.
Absolutely, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right. But first, I wanted to thank the chair and this panel for the opportunity to speak here tonight. Unfortunately, our CEO, Sam Shaker, had a business conflict at the last minute. But I'm glad to be here. So I'm Fred Bailey. I'm the Vice President for Reactor Decommissioning for AREVA, and I'm based in our head office in Washington, D.C. A little bit of background, I've been with AREVA roughly for 20 years, and I started my career as a test engineer at the reprocessing plant in Normandy in France. And I worked on spent fuel projects, maintenance and operations projects, remote handling type of activities on our plants for 6 years. Then I moved to the US, worked a little bit on spent fuel management strategy in the US. Did some work back at the corporate office in Paris for a few years on some key projects in France, in Paris, and came back to the US a few years ago. And I'm now responsible for the decommissioning activities for AREVA in the US. So in this presentation, I'll try to provide some information about our company, our role in the NorthStar proposal to decommission Vermont Yankee, and some of the unique expertise and experience that we bring to this team. There will be also at the end of my presentation a short video to present some of the specific and unique expertise that we bring. If we go to slide number 3, I'd like to present here the new global structure of the company. Beginning earlier this year, the new AREVA began operating as an independent global company, and it was formed as after the recent global separation of the AREVA group into multiple independent entities. So what you see here under new AREVA are the overall activities of that entity, and a special focus for AREVA nuclear materials in the US. These are the activities that our company perform in the United States. It's a subsidiary of the new AREVA, and the other part of the company is focused on reactor services and development. So maybe I'll focus on a couple of areas. In the US, we provide mining, conversion, and enrichment sales services. TN Americas is based in Columbia, Maryland, and they provide spent fuel services and dry gas storage solutions and other type of transportation services for nuclear waste. AREVA D&D is focused on the decommissioning and dismantling. AREVA Federal Services is a subsidiary of AREVA Nuclear Materials that performs services for the federal government. And also AREVA Med, based in Texas, is developing some cancer fighting isotopes in radio immunotherapy in the US and in Europe. In the US, they are based in Texas. If we go to the next slide, I'd like to focus on a few items here on this point. There's roughly 32 billion euros of business under contract under that new company. So it's roughly 8 years of operations. You can see the revenue sources bar charts, the blue and purple ones that our US business is involved in. If you look at the red, highlighted in red text, that represent an important part of the new AREVA portfolio. In the US, we're approximately 600 employees and generated more than $900 million in 2016 from our operations. We're headquartered in DC and roughly a dozen of operation sites in the US. If we go to the next slide, our activities, for those activities, our focus is and responsibilities is on items number 4 and 5, and also to support the SVC, the storage-only site organization for the used fuel management program. So number 4 is precisely to cut apart the reactor vessel and internals. Number 5 is to package those internals and segments of the reactor vessel and transport them off-site to a rad waste disposal facility. All our work is going to be performed under firm fixed price contracts, It means that for every single activity that we perform, the price has been locked, and it's locked in before we start the work. If there's any expenses that go over this, we are responsible for covering and make it by contract by performing the work. Now, I'd like to give a little bit more details on the activities and background. What you see on the left-hand side, it's the way the reactor vessel in Germany at Vorgassen was segmented. It was segmented in very small pieces in Germany because of the specifics of the disposal path and route in Germany, which we don't have the same constraints in the US for. We have available transportation and disposal path that allow bigger pieces. And in the US, as a matter of fact, there's also reactor vessels that have been transported in one piece only. We're not going to do that here, but it's an example. The reactor vessel at Vermont Yankee is very similar to the reactor vessel at Vorgassen in terms of design, and it is the same for the internal components of the reactor vessel. So this chart shows that we've performed similar decommissioning activities in the US that the ones that we plan to perform at Vermont Yankee. So we've segmented both BWR, that's the boiling water reactors like Vermont Yankee, and PWRs. You can also find more information on the website. I think there's also one piece that having the German experience at Stade and Vorgassen, they improved technology that was developed in the US, so we're going to bring it back and use it in the US for the Vermont Yankee project on some of the special toolings that you would see. Page 7. So like I said, I have a video at the end of this presentation, but just a few words. First, it's safety first is our motto within AREVA in all our project deliveries, and safety to the environment, to the public, and to our workers. So most of the work is going to be conducted remotely, underwater, inside the reactor vessel, to prevent and minimize the dose. So if you look at the top left picture, you see underwater cutting using abrasive water jet. So that's underwater with ultra high pressure with some abrasive grits that come and cut through the metal. So bottom left, it's a bandsaw, but it's a very large one, so we're going to use a significant size type of toolings to perform the work. On the top right, it's just an example to show that it's very detailed work. The segmentation plan and the packaging plan requires a lot of engineering into it. We take into account the disposal path, where it's going to be disposed of. We take into account the transportation regulation and constraints, so that we know what type of segments or pieces of the reactor we're going to put and how we're going to put them in such or such container. Bottom right, it's an example of, that is not what we're going to do here, but it's just an example of significant complex D&D decommissioning projects that we have performed. This one is an example of a MOX fuel fabrication facility that we finalized the dismantling last year. So like I said, there'll be more on the segmentation in a couple of minutes in the short video. So page 9. So as noted on this slide, we're going to use waste packages in a way that we're going to maximize the efficiency of the packaging and minimize the number of packages to condition the reactor vessel internals and the reactor vessel. As a consequence, it'll reduce also the number of transports to the disposal site. So either way, we'll use NRC license canisters to ship those pieces of equipment. If you look at the two pictures, bottom left is what we call the rad waste canisters. This is welded shut. Once we have put the internals and pieces in there, we're going to dry, remove the water, and then weld it shut. And then it is transferred in a transportation overpack. This one actually has been designed to be able to transport spent nuclear fuel. So it's a little bit over-designed for rad waste containers for activated material, but it's what we're going to be using to maximize the size of those packages and reduce the number of shipments. Another point also is that globally we perform over 3,000 shipments per year of radioactive materials. We also perform in Europe over 250 shipments of spent nuclear fuel per year, each year. It is something that is done routinely, safely, with a very well-known environment, regulatory environment, to protect the environment and the people. So on the next slide, just to indicate that we're also a leader in used fuel management, and we pioneered the NRC licensed aging management system for canisters. And at VY, we will be supporting the East VC only site organization until the Department of Energy comes and picks up the fuel. With this, I would like to probably go to the movie, and let's take a look at some of the segmentation and dismantling technology. So it's actual cutting and dismantling. So you can see there's some text to explain which is which. All this type of setup is performed at the plant, but it's also prepared over a few months of a training off-site to perform the work in an inactive situation before going on-site. That's the head that delivers the high pressure. These pictures come from the Burgassen segmentation in Germany with very similar internal equipments as the one that are in the reactor at Vermont Yankee. portion of the work we will be performing will be using. For this portion, we'll be using a slightly different technology for the vessel itself. And again, the reason being we don't need to cut into that many pieces. We don't need to cut the vessel into 255 pieces. That's the bottom of the reactor vessel. It's being lifted up. It's the last piece. That's from E.ON in Germany. Well, thank you for watching. I'm glad to answer any questions about our presentation.
Sure, we're going to take a couple minutes to have the panel ask questions, and then we're going to open the floor up to the public to ask questions. Bill.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. Just wanted to ask, the Vergassen segmentation was 255 pieces. How many pieces will the Vermont Yankee segmentation be?
For the vessel, it'll be less than 20 pieces. And for the internals, we're going to generate for the highest activity pieces roughly 10 containers, all in all in the 30 containers range.
And is everything that you're going to be responsible for going to be shipped off-site? None of what you are doing is related to greater than Class C waste to be stored in the casks left at the independent spent fuel storage installation? Or is some of your work going to result in some contents going into those casks at the ISVC?
Some of our work is going to be greater than Class C material that we will cut and condition on a canister that's going to be stored at the site.
Okay, thank you.
On the used fuel storage, aging management, what duration are you anticipating? How long are you thinking that responsibility is going to last?
Well, the way we design our systems is we comply with the regulation to design them. The license is granted by the NRC for 20 years, and then you go into a process of what do you need to look at and inspect to make sure that the casks are in the same situation as they should be. So that's where we talk about the aging management. For the storage of the spent fuel itself in the cask, they are stored under inert gas, and they're stored. There's no chemical reason for them to have a physical change for tens of years. Really, if you look at the way it's built, it's either zirconium or stainless steel parts and ceramics that are dried and stored into these pieces of metal.
And maybe I don't understand everything that entails, but I know that under the new spent fuel rules that NRC is saying that spent fuel can remain on site indefinitely, and you're saying you got fixed price contracts. I mean, is it possible that you could be doing the aging management indefinitely? Is that part of your calculus, or how does that work? I guess,
well,
or maybe I'm misunderstanding.
No, yeah, we're going to provide the support to the licensee, who's the plant, who's owning the fuel, and who's responsible for the SVC management. We're going to provide the support that the licensee needs to answer to the NRC questions, should there be any questions on the long term. We bring that knowledge and experience of having dealt with spent fuel for decades.
These transport casks that you have illustrated, that the canister goes into, and then it says can be transported by rail, truck, or marine transport. In the case of Vermont Yankee, how will these things be transported?
They will be transported by rail, and they will be transported by rail all the way to the disposal site.
Okay, so they'll be loaded onto rail cars here.
Correct.
And I know that, for the eventual hoped-for transportation of the fuel canisters themselves here, the Department of Transportation and Department of Energy have been working on the technology for that rail transport and actually designing rail cars, as I understand it, right from the ground up, specially designed. Would you be using that kind of rail car here, or what would you be using?
Yes, in fact, we're working as AREVA Federal Services is working for the Department of Energy on the prototype of a rail car for transportation of spent fuel casks. So we're currently working for the DOE on Department of Energy on this. We use transport rail cars in Europe that are adapted to European standards, the regulation in the US, and the expectations from the Railroad Association in the US are such that they are significantly different from Europe. However, they are going to be close to what the Department of Defense uses routinely to transport some of their spent fuel in the US. So that's rail cars, and so we're working on that, yes.
Yeah, Fred, obviously from the video, you guys use some very unique equipment to do your segmentation work. From your experience, how would you characterize the reliability of those major pieces of equipment that you're using?
Well, I think the tools themselves are pretty reliable, and they're flexible because especially if you look at the abrasive water jet technology, it's a technology that you deliver the power to cut without touching the pieces. One thing that we learned, I would say the hard way at Maine Yankee is one of the key elements is how you maintain the water clarity when you do the work underwater. And that's one of the piece of the significant improvements that the Germans have brought. They've changed the operating parameters of the cutting technology, and they've mastered the filtration and local filtration systems that we're going to bring and use here. That's why I was saying it was invented here. We're going to bring it back.
So it's actually not a question. I wanted to just share with the panel that I have counterparts in Maine and Connecticut that I frequently discuss a variety of issues, including the decommissioning of Vermont Yankee. And I was very glad to hear that their experience with AREVA during the decommissioning of Maine Yankee and Connecticut Yankee were without significant problems. And so that gave me some very good assurance, because my counterparts in those two states are equally aggressive at attempting to protect the public health and environment.
I have a question. What's the time frame, the length of time to do this? How many employees are you hiring, and where are those people coming from?
Okay, so we're going to staff the project from the entities that we have in the US. We're going to, like I said, we're going to test those tools and procedures and also, by the way, train those who will be performing the work before we go on site. At peak, all in all, with all the support, it's going to be in the 30 to 40 people supporting directly on site or from back office. The timing is within 24 months we will be done with the internals and with the vessel. So if we get on site January 1st of 2019, we'll be done with the internals and the reactor vessel shipped off-site by the end of 2020.
And are those 30 or 40 people, are they going to be consistent through that 24 months, or is it going to be different people?
Pretty strong core team, and especially for the people who will be doing the work on site.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because NorthStar has been quoting a number of jobs that are going to be created by this, but these are people coming from outside the area in for about 2 years. Does that make sense?
Yes, for most of them,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We just want them to eat in our restaurants and go to our shops.
But if I may just make a comment on this, I cannot tell you how surprised I was. I didn't know Vermont a few months ago, and I was really impressed by the area and by the small communities here in Vernon and by the Brattleboro city as well.
Well, Katie just made a comment, which I totally agree with, is it would be nice if they were hired from here, but if they can't be hired from here, if they come here, we want them to be better. We need to spend money. Does anyone else on the panel have any? Yeah, David.
I want to connect a couple of dots. Your question about the reliability of equipment goes to this very question about how many years they're going to be on site. I mean, if you had a major breakdown of, I don't know, the saw, how quickly could you replace it?
Well, for those mechanical equipments, some of them we order 2 when we didn't need 1, just in case. For those that we consider, how do you say that, consumables for the mechanical equipment. For the other ones, for the pumps and the high pressure, we're going to have spare parts for the critical parts that our German colleagues have recommended that they do change from time to time. It's really based on their experience, and beyond the segmentation work that they've performed at the plants, they've continued to use this technology as a tool for maintenance in the support that they bring to the reactors. So they don't use it only for segmentation from time to time.
Does anyone else on the panel have any questions? All right, I'm going to open it up to the public, and if you have a question, there is a microphone on that podium, and what I would ask is that you just come up and give your name and where you're from, and if you could keep it to a couple, 2 minutes or so, that would be helpful. Anyone not have any questions? Oh yeah, please come up.
Green? Am I on here?
So,
Speak up.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm Skylar Gould. I'm with New England Coalition on Nuclear Pollution. I'm a trustee.
They're telling me you're not on. Is it not working?
Am I on now? Am I on now? I don't.
Well, it's really not my system. Testing? Yes.
Oh, I think you're on, but I think it's just BCTV's not getting it.
It's on. Yes, so you're coming through fine.
Okay. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. Just a couple of simple questions. Have AREVA and NorthStar already reached those fixed price contracts?
To perform the work for the segmentation work? Yes.
And in your experience, for all your decommissioning experience, AREVA's decommissioning experience with the different reactors, have any of the other reactors had schools operating during the, within 1,000 feet of the reactor while the decommissioning is going on?
I don't know the answer to that.
Would you find that problematic?
I don't think so problematic because of the way we operate and because of the way the risks are managed and the methods that we use within the reactor building, that we're going to be operating the way we perform the work everywhere. The transportation is going to be in those systems and that are licensed by the NRC and or the Department of Transportation, depending on the case, and they are designed to protect the public.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Bill Irwin has a quick follow-up, and then we're going to keep taking public questions.
Just to follow up on the gentleman's questions, I wanted to verify the status of the reactor building for your segmentation processes. The reactor building is not going to be in any way altered from its current state as a secondary containment until after your 24-month segmentation period. So you'll still have all of the protection that is afforded the reactor during operations, or will there be modifications to the reactor building that could increase the probability of releases into the environment?
Well, I don't think the situation is going to put any risk on releases to the environment when we will be performing the work. There will still be ventilation on the reactor building that ensures the active, what we say active, how do you say that? The forced ventilation that's going to create depression will still be in place. And we're going to perform the work in the reactor building right after the fuel will be transferred outside of the pool. And that's really the next step right after that.
Yeah, Deb.
So I've been told to talk loud because, of course, the mic doesn't work. And I talk loud anyway. So my name's Deb Katz. I'm with the Citizens Awareness Network. My group sued the NRC over the decommissioning of Yankee Row. And so in the process, we got internal documents about what happened at Row. And one of the things that happened during the segmentation of the internals at Row was that a significant amount of hot particles were released onto that site. And what I would like to understand from AREVA, since you talked about being involved with that, was what went wrong at Row?
Well, thank you for your question. I do not know the answer to that. What I know is that our scope on this was support to the project, and we did some of the packaging and shipping engineering.
So you weren't involved in the segmentation?
We were supporting the engineering of the work there, like I said, and we worked mainly on the packaging and shipping, but it was as a support to the main contractor. So I really don't know the answer.
Because one of the concerns in this, at Row, it was 2,000 acres. It was a very large site. So the issue of hot particles being spread over the site, as bad as it was, and how workers were exposed, really the people in the community were protected to a large extent just by the size of the site. But Vermont Yankee is 100 acres, and it's across from a school. And so the issue of concern that we have is something that could happen at Row, could happen here at Vermont Yankee, which would have a potentially much more devastating effect over time if, in fact, hot particles wound up being released. So
I mean, I agree with you that the release of particles is not good. One of
I'm glad.
at all. And so a part of the answer is the containment and the ventilation and the HVAC system that ensures that. The other piece is that really we're going to perform that work, cutting the internals underwater.
It was done at Row underwater as well.
And I don't know the answer to that.
So I'd also like to get a sense of what you have experienced at different sites in terms of worker exposure during the segmentation and cutting of the internals.
As a reference that's closest to Vermont Yankee on what we have performed is Vorgassen. We had, per the engineering, we were going to have up to what we call 30 man rem exposure over the time of the work. It ended up being 50% of what we had engineered in the way we implemented the work.
So is 15 rem exposure for all of those 40 workers?
No, it's a total cumulative dose for
Okay.
For the entire crew who did the work over that period of time. So that was 50% less than the plan that we have designed it to.
And how are the workers monitored?
Well, they were monitored by the regulation.
No, I understand, but in terms of the badges, the levels of exposure on the badges that came up, I'm just interested, because at Row, some of the workers were overexposed and had to be pulled off the job.
Yeah, no, that's certainly not something that we're going to do. No, in no way.
I hope so.
Thank you.
Peter Vanderdoos from Brattleboro. First, I'd like to thank Bill Irwin for his testimony in front of the NRC Atomic Safety Licensing Board in 2013. The nature of his questions showed that he was really concerned about people's health. Thank you for that, Bill. I don't know if this question is for AREVA or NorthStar, and I understand that NorthStar is not here. When the reactor building is taken down, to keep the dust down, do you use high-pressure water on the building or tenting?
Oh, that's a question for NorthStar.
I see. All right, thank you. The other question I have, I saw your slides, and I'm curious, New Homes and Holtec are two different dry cast companies. I assume that the Holtec High Storm 100s will fit into the New Homes transports?
They are currently not licensed to be transported in our overpack.
Do they fit?
Do they, in dimension, do they fit? As far as I know, they are not far, and they probably will. The diameter of the container itself, compared to the diameter of the systems that you see on site, is much smaller.
I see. And the New Homes transports that were in the slides, are they the same as the Castors used in Europe?
No, they are not the same as the castles
I see.
used in Europe.
Thanks very much.
Sure.
Does anyone else in the public?
Guy Page with Energy Partnership. Just a quick question. I noticed the 66% reduction in rad waste canisters. What will be the total number of canisters?
Roughly 90 packages. If we used what's currently available and used on the market, we're using a state-of-the-art larger capacity rad waste container to maximize the loading and minimize the number of packages.
And the average train load is, what, 10 or 15 or something, or what? I have no idea.
Well, so those are going to come out along the process. For some of them will go as we process the waste. So I don't have the answer to your question on the number of rail cars. A piece of information I can give you is that roughly the MP 197 that was on the slide that handled the highest radioactive parts, it's roughly 1 per month.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Deb has a quick follow-up.
You brought up the transport, so with the old casks that were on the road, there were 2 fuel assemblies in each cask. So approximately how many fuel assemblies would be in each of these canisters that go by rail?
Okay, so I just want to step back and make sure we understand. When I speak about the shipments, I'm speaking about the shipments from the waste from the segmentation work. I'm not speaking
the Class C waste.
Class A, B, and C waste from the segmentation work. I'm not speaking about the spent fuel shipments.
So, can you speak to the spent fuel shipments?
I can speak to you about the design that we have for our transportation cask.
So I have 2 questions in terms of that. One is, since you're talking about being able to put more of the waste in, is this true with the high-level waste, or this is just the Class C waste, putting more waste in the canisters for shipment?
It is true for the waste because the size of the package is bigger and the diameter is bigger.
So approximately, in terms of the internals, how many curies would be in each of those shipments that would go on the road?
I don't have the number on top of my head, and that'll be below what the regulation
I understand that,
is
but it
imposing.
still can be pretty high.
Yes, the curie content is going to be
Is it
significant.
possible for you to get that information?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Lissa Weinman from Brattleboro. I just had a question about the nature of your partnership. You're calling it a partnership, but it seems to me that you're more of a subcontractor for NorthStar. How do you describe your AREVA's relationship to NorthStar?
So it's very clear on the Vermont Yankee project. We're a subcontractor to NorthStar.
Okay. And when you disassemble the elements, is there any forensics that's done? I've heard that there's groups that, information about the state of the reactor, since we have so many aging reactors still operating, and particularly these Mark I boiling water reactors still operating past their original license. Do you do any kind of forensics on it in terms of the wear and tear and elements and communicate that to others?
So when we do this, we don't do it for maintenance or inspection. We come into condition and package. Of course, we'll pay attention to what we see when we perform the work, and that'll be part of what we learn. The process for monitoring this is pretty clear. When the utilities do outages, they look at the status of the vessel and internals.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what we're going to do. We're going to remove the internals and remove and segment the vessel.
So just to be clear, if the NorthStar sale doesn't go through, you could perform these same services for Entergy directly, just the way you've described to us here today, right? I mean, if Entergy wanted to hire you to do that, they could.
If Entergy
right?
wanted to hire us to do it, sure.
And my final question, what happens to the spent fuel and radioactive waste in general in France and different countries you've worked in Europe? We know that we don't have a geologic repository here, and that the odds are likely that the waste is going to be sitting here at the Vernon site indefinitely until we do have some type of geologic storage. What do you do in France? I know you reprocess some of it, but you got about 1/3 of it left over. What happens? Do you have a geologic repository? Are you aware of one that's functioning anywhere in the world right now?
So there's, in France, there's a laboratory for a deep geological disposal in eastern France, the region I come from. And also, you're right, we recycle the spent fuel. What we do is we transport the fuel from the reactors to a reprocessing plant where the fuel is cooled down for a couple of years. And then it's cut into pieces and dissolved, and the recyclable material are extracted, and uranium and plutonium are recovered. We then manufacture what we call a mixed oxide fuel. That's a blend of plutonium oxide and uranium oxide, and we do a new fuel with it. By doing this with 8 spent fuel, you end up with 1 fresh MOX fuel. That's the way the utility in France is managing its spent fuel, and we're supporting them as a service, managing the spent fuel for them and recycling those.
But not 100% of it's recycled. Some of it goes to the geologic. What percentage goes into the...
So 4% roughly are what we call fission products. They are not uranium or plutonium, and they are conditioned into a vitrified matrix. It's a glass matrix, very stable, and they're stored on site, waiting for the geological repository to open in, is it 2025 or something like that?
Oh,
in France.
it's not open yet.
It is not open yet, no.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you. Fred, thank you very much. What we're going to do is take a 5-minute break. So 8:08, come back, and we'll have a presentation from Burns and McDonnell. But thank you, Fred. Hello, everybody. We're back. Now I'd like to welcome Glenn Nisus, who is the Nuclear Director for Burns and McDonnell. And I hope I didn't slaughter your last name. Okay, good.
Okay, well, good evening. And I want to thank you, Kate, and the committee here for inviting us to present. I think it's a good opportunity for everyone to learn a little bit more about who Burns and McDonnell is and what we can bring to this project. Just as a way of introduction, as Kate said, I am the Nuclear Director at Burns and McDonnell. I've got about 31 years in nuclear power. I spent my first 25 years of my career working at a nuclear operating plant, Wolf Creek plant in Kansas. The last 7 years I've been with Burns and McDonnell running nuclear power. On the next slide, we usually begin with a safety moment. Joe Lynch covered that earlier for us, so I will just skip to our safety statistics on the next slide. We're very proud of these. We are ranked in the top 1% of the industry in safety. This does cover our engineering and construction projects. The two graphs you see there compares us to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Construction Industry Institute. And based on the total recordable incident rate and days away restricted or transferred, we are in the 1% of the industry. On the next slide, you'll see the team that you're becoming more familiar with. Burns McDonnell is responsible for engineering and licensing support to NorthStar. It certainly is not the specialized activities that Fred Bailey just went over for AREVA. We'll be providing any engineering solutions and licensing support that NorthStar needs to complete the decommissioning. So why Burns and McDonnell? This is a pretty standard slide we use in many of our presentations. We are an engineering-focused company. We do a lot of construction. About half of our business is in the construction area. But we are first and foremost an engineering company and bring a lot of experience to the table on that. We consider ourselves a trusted partner with many of our clients. We do have a reputation of a high degree of repeat business. We only get that by doing good jobs for our clients over and over again, and it's currently about 90% repeat business. and we bring a wide and diverse set of knowledge and experience to the table, a large skill set that I'm going to be going over here this evening. So a little bit more about Burns & McDonnell. We've been in business for almost 120 years. Our company was started by 2 graduates from Stanford back in 1898. They relocated to Kansas City because that was the area of the country that needed clean water and reliable power. The country had basically grown as far as St. Louis or so. They decided they could create a business, an engineering firm that could supply these solutions to a growing country. And since then, we've grown to 5,700 people. So more on who we are. As I said, we are in the top 1% of safety. We're currently about 5,700 professionals. We are number 1 in power, and what that means is that's based on revenue. We do more projects in the electrical power industry than any other engineering firm in the nation. That includes nuclear, fossil, solar, and wind. And we're a 100% employee-owned company. That's important because it really drives commitment to the project, commitment to our clients, because everybody in the company is a stockholder. If the project doesn't go well, if the client isn't happy, it's all reflected in the company's stock price, which is part of the compensation that each individual receives. So everybody's a stockholder in the company, from the new grad all the way to the CEO. We are also have 40 offices worldwide. I'm going to show you those, I think, on one of the next slides. Key industries and markets we serve. We are a very diverse company, which allows us to bring a strong skill set and very diverse skills to the table. As you see in the upper right of that slide, we do work in nuclear power plants. We design airports, runways, airline terminals, refueling stations. We design water treatment plants, bridges, coal or fossil plants, transmission lines. We are also the number 1 provider of transmission lines in the nation. We do refineries, lab facilities, food processing plants, export terminals. We just got done with an export terminal that was designed on the Louisiana coast. We do highways, rail, military bases, domestically and overseas. We design wetlands and clean up wetlands as well. Hydroelectric dams, natural gas pipelines, solar and wind farms. So we bring a large skill set to the table for many activities. Next slide. As I said, we also do construction, and we are an EPC provider, engineering, procurement, and construction provider. About half of our business is in construction, and we've developed a skill set, as you go around the wheel there, to bring the entire package to the table. It's one of the reasons we were selected by NorthStar to assist them on this. If there's anything that's needed, anything environmental-wise, permitting-wise, procurement, construction, routing and siting, safety, real estate, project management, planning, we bring those skill sets to the table in addition to engineering. Next slide. Okay, so where we are headquartered in Kansas City. We've got about 3,000 people in Kansas City, and the other 2,700 to 3,000 people are spread out across the United States, and a few of them internationally. Our largest regional offices, one of our largest regional offices is in the Northeast. It's in the Wallingford, Connecticut area. And then you'll see there also we have international offices, a presence in Canada, in the UK, the Middle East, India, and the Far East. Focusing on our Northeast offices, we do have roughly 400 people in the Northeast area. Our regional offices is in Wallingford. We also have offices in those cities you see there, mainly focusing on a lot of power projects, transmission and distribution projects, and aircraft infrastructure projects. Some of the projects we've performed in the Vermont and New England area. We've worked for Vermont Electric Power Company, Vermont Transco, and oddly enough, when I was doing a little bit of research, Ben & Jerry's. We assisted them with some of their production lines. We've done work for Central Maine Power, National Grid, Eversource Energy, Northeast Utilities. We did participate a little bit on the Connecticut Yankee decommissioning, actually not as Burns & McDonnell. We hired one of the individuals several years ago, about a decade or so ago, who was the site closure, the director of site closure, and the decommissioning manager during that project, and he now runs our Wallingford office. Some of the nuclear offerings, we mainly work in nuclear power plant engineering services. We provide engineering modifications and licensing support. That's what NorthStar brought us on the team to do. Small to large modifications, everything from modifications dealing with the nuclear steam supply system to transformers to INC modifications, cybersecurity, water solutions. We're now getting into more decommissioning services with NorthStar. We're also involved with new nuclear power plant design. We've worked for Westinghouse on their small modular reactor design, and we're teamed with Entergy, an advanced reactor company, to assist them on their advanced reactor design. On the federal services side, we also work for the Department of Energy, mainly doing infrastructure work at the national labs. Some of our nuclear projects and clients, they're really all over the U.S., some in Canada, some in Mexico, and even a project over in South Korea. Again, mainly dealing with design projects, either for the nuclear steam supply system or the balance of plant. Our larger clients are Wolf Creek, Callaway, and Palo Verde. We've worked for Holtec, who is currently doing the ISFAC out at Vermont Yankee. We worked for the U.S. Navy. We've worked on the new projects that are being done down at Vogtle 3 and 4. So again, a wide and diverse set of nuclear power plant engineering experience. This really isn't that readable on the screen. You have it in your handouts. But basically it lists some of the nuclear plant facilities that we've worked at, doing everything from program management, technical studies, detailed design, owner's engineering, field services, and startup testing. Some of the company awards, we're again very proud of these. We are one of the 100 best companies to work for in the United States. Number 1 is Google. We're number 16 on the list, and a lot of this has to do with how we treat our people, the fact that everybody's an owner and has a stake in the project, and then receives the benefit from those successful projects. We were named the ESOP Company of the Year in 2012 based on that. We've won the ENR, that's the Engineering News Record, New England Best Energy Industrial Project in 2016 for the Interstate Reliability Project that was done in the Northeast. It was actually done in Connecticut. It involved transmission and distribution infrastructure improvement and substation improvements in the Connecticut to Rhode Island area. We won the Premier Award for Client Satisfaction from the Professional Services Management Journal the last 6 consecutive years. It's the highest award that they give, and it's based on client surveys. Some of our representative projects for decommissioning and demolition. A lot of our work has been on the fossil side of the house, decommissioning coal and gas plants, some in other industrial facilities. We've worked for 28 different clients, 34 sites, 23 of these involving full demolition, where we're also in charge of construction or deconstruction. Some of the services that are involved here ranged everywhere from owner's engineering, similar to what we're doing for NorthStar, dealing with regulated materials, utility disconnects and reroutes, environmental assessments and remediations, regulatory interface for the owner, again, what we're doing for NorthStar, site end-use evaluation on whether the property should be turned into another industrial site or returned to total greenfield use, project management and turnkey demolition activities. On the nuclear and radiological side, I'm sorry, this is another fossil example here. I chose this one because we had before and after slides. You'll see the top there is before. This was two coal power plants that were built in the 1940s. You can imagine the difference in regulations between then and now, how the site may have looked. We were responsible for demolition and removal of facilities, coal and ash handling facility removal. We also had to work around substation and transmission lines, similar to what we'll be dealing with at the Vermont Yankee site. We did regulated material assessment, subsurface investigations, did PCB remediation, recycling, underground utilities, address those, and closure of all ash ponds and removal of the facilities and structures. You can see the before and after, the green field on the bottom.
Where was that one?
I think this was in Indiana. Next slide involves one of our larger nuclear and radiological projects that we were involved with for decommissioning. It's still ongoing. We are the decommissioning manager for this site. It's the Cimarron Environmental Response Trust site located in Oklahoma. We are the trustee and the special nuclear materials license holder and decommissioning manager for this, and we're responsible for all environmental cleanup. It is in the later stages of decommissioning. All buildings have been released for unrestricted use, and it's about a 700-acre site. It was a former uranium and fuel production facility. Again, a very not a very clean facility, if you will, to deal with, and we're nearing the completion on that project. This next slide here involves another fuel production facility. It was a uranium and mixed oxide fuel production facility. This project is complete. You can see the before and after slides there. What made this especially complicated, this site was also put on top of a site that was previously a refinery. So all the contaminants dealing with that facility had to be remediated or cleaned up, in addition to the nuclear contamination that was there. It was a 440-acre site producing uranium fuel and thorium. Again, mixed waste, soil remediation, piping. Over 1 million cubic feet of low-level radioactive waste was shipped in 3,000 containers to a disposal facility, and we evaluated over 150,000 samples in order to clean up this facility. This was completed a few years ago. Those are our two largest, I guess I would call, nuclear and radiological decontamination projects. What I'd like to do now is just present this is an overview video. It's not really dealing with decommissioning. It's not as cool as Fred's, where he did all the cutting and showing of all that stuff. This is kind of a general overview of some of the energy and environmental projects we do.
Communities have large, complex systems. People have simple but critical needs. The best solutions will support our lives. for generations to come. Since 1898, Burns & McDonnell's been meeting needs like these and others. By helping our clients solve the tough problems, we're making a difference to people and communities around the world. At Burns & McDonnell, we do work that matters. Engineering today has a financial dimension that adds a challenge to every equation.
Our chillers were coming to the end of their useful life, and the university didn't have the money to just go out and buy a new central cooling plant. So we started looking at performance contracts to see if we could get a project that would fund itself through energy savings. And that's where Burns & McDonnell came in. They designed us a new central cooling plant. Controls were added throughout the campus, lighting retrofits, and as it's all integrated together, the project will fund itself over 15 years.
America's natural resources are plentiful. Putting them to use is the challenge. Burns & McDonnell engineers solutions. At Burns & McDonnell, we believe that economic success and environmental responsibility aren't mutually exclusive. Some of our environmental projects touch us where we live. Others are more global in scale and significance.
The Everglades was dying because of polluted water flowing from the north off of farmlands and urban development into the Everglades. South Florida is at our maximum, if you will, of the amount of water that we can withdraw safely from the Biscayne Aquifer. And we needed the world's best experts to help us, advise us, and work with us. With Burns & McDonnell, we developed thousands of acres of marsh filters. The good news is that we have experienced tremendous success with the Everglades stormwater treatment areas. We're not only restoring the environment, but we're providing water for future population growth.
We're part of the communities where we live and work. So when there's a critical need, Burns & McDonnell is quick to respond.
The Missouri River and the Kansas River were flooding at the same time. So we started getting sinkholes all throughout the confines of where our water plant and our power plants were located. And this was all happening early Sunday morning, and we reached out to Burns & Mac, and they immediately responded. We had several engineers, structural, geotech, whatever we needed. They were here with us for roughly the 2-week stress period. They slept down here. They understood this was the only water supply for our community at the time. And I credit Burns & McDonnell for not only saving the plant, but it saved our community.
In healthcare, defense, transportation, energy, the environment, Burns & McDonnell clients are looking for lasting solutions to the important challenges of our times. At Burns & McDonnell, we do work that matters.
A general overview of Burns & McDonnell, what we do and how we're going to be assisting NorthStar on this project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Does anyone on the panel have questions? Bill?
So I was really intrigued by the hub and spoke diagram of the integration one team and the multiple activities that you engage in different places. And note that for Vermont Yankee, you're really focusing on engineering and licensing of all of those spokes. Is it your understanding that the rest of those that are not related to waste management and segmentation of the reactor vessel and internals is to be managed by NorthStar?
It's to be managed by NorthStar with assistance from us wherever they need it.
And was Burns & McDonnell interested in or working on attempting to do more of this kind of complete spoke approach to Vermont Yankee decommissioning. It's kind of interesting that you could do it all, and for this project, you're doing just a couple of different things.
I would say that NorthStar, certainly has more experience than we do in large-scale demolitions, and AREVA certainly brings a skill set on the reactor vessel segmentation that we certainly don't have any of, and that we bring a lot of skills to the table to assist NorthStar, but that I think that they have experience in doing the nuclear demolitions, the nuclear decommissionings that are necessary for Vermont Yankee.
Thank you.
Could you just give me a couple of examples of what it means to provide engineering support? I mean, I'm having trouble sort of wrapping my head around that, because most of the activity that I envision is to deal with building removal and the vessel and all the innards. And we've had a presentation of the company that's going to do that. So what does engineering support mean?
So you're correct in that certainly the largest scopes on this project is what NorthStar is going to do with the demolition, what AREVA is going to do with the reactor vessel segmentation. Certainly, what WCS is going to do with the burial and so transportation of some of that material as well. There's going to be power reroutes that are going to be needed. There's going to be some structural analysis that's going to be needed. There's going to be possibly some environmental support that NorthStar is going to need from us. There's going to be licensing submittals that are going to need to be made. We bring those experience sets to the table to assist NorthStar in those other activities that really support the main projects of the deconstruction and the segmentation. For example, we were talking earlier with NorthStar about if there was any rail line redesign that was going to be needed in order to get some of the material out. We're still discussing whether that's necessary or not. Whether or not there's going to be any a structure that would need to be put up for to ensure when any of the material was loaded, it wouldn't be exposed to the environment. So anything dealing with design needs from that respect, we would bring that to the table.
So those of us that are concerned that the waste is being stored 50 yards from the Connecticut River, should one of the casts develop a problem in a heavy rain situation, you might design the protection for the Connecticut River?
For the Connecticut River. I think we were talking about a structure, a loading structure where they would be loading the waste into the rail cars that would be going to WCS. We also have experience with ISFACs and security and doing security modifications if they're needed.
Well, that's what I meant in terms of the storage of the high-level waste. There are some of us who don't think it ought to be 50 yards from the shore of the Connecticut River. And should a problem arise as this project is going forward, it's your engineering that steps in that situation?
We would bring those capabilities, yes.
Okay. I really want you to be as good as you say you are.
Does anyone else on the panel have any questions? Oh, Bill.
Can you estimate how many people?
Oh, I was about to ask that question.
Do you want to?
No, you can ask. You're halfway there.
Okay. Yeah, what kind of staffing you're talking about for how long for the project if it were to go on according to the NorthStar schedule?
We've done some estimates. It's not a large staff. We would certainly locate people at the Vermont Yankee site as needed for NorthStar support, but we're talking probably a small staff, probably less than 10 people. And then, for anything significant, again, to keep costs down on the project, we'd try to do some of the work out of Kansas City or out of our Wallingford office, but certainly be on site to support the project, hands-on or eyes-on, if you will, as needed.
And for the duration, you're there from start to finish?
I suspect it will be a come-and-go type thing where certainly if AREVA is doing work inside containment with the reactor vessel, and that's all that's going on, it's their activity. And unless they specifically called for support or NorthStar specifically called for support, we wouldn't necessarily be there in order to manage costs on the project.
Does it?
Cost. Your costs with a less than absolute rigid schedule and presence and whatever, are they part of the cost that NorthStar is projecting for its 900 tasks? And NorthStar's not here, and maybe I should direct the question to them, but it seems to me that your cost might vary depending on whether things go smoothly, no equipment breaks, no problems develop. But if they do, then are your costs part of the schedule that is being touted as how we're going to ensure that we get through full decommissioning?
Yes, our costs have been factored into that NorthStar estimate based on their experience, our experience, and other decommissioning experiences.
So do you have a locked-in, if you will, contract or reimbursement package? Again, and we've had this discussion earlier about unanticipated events, and that they have and do happen.
I think NorthStar has talked in previous meetings about planning for some unanticipated items. We are not currently under a contract yet, but we've provided estimates and to NorthStar on what would be needed.
And that's what they built in?
Yes, and that's been built in.
All right, thank you.
Does anyone else on the panel have any questions? Oh. No.
One of the things, and this is not just for you, but I'm sure Entergy and their predecessor did a lot of outreach to schools, just even like careers in this type of field and that kind of thing. I know PCL FIG, when they were building the bridge, they did outreach to schools about and brought them onto the site and that kind of thing. I'm just wondering to what extent there might be an opportunity for a number of different, including Entergy while they're still here in NorthStar, you guys, AREVA, and others, just to what extent that there could be kind of, because we're going to have a lot of people coming through with a lot of different skill sets, it might be worth kind of setting up something with the schools about STEM type jobs related to these kinds of work. Just an idea.
Good idea. Anyone else on the panel? Does anyone in the public have any questions? Yes, Lissa.
Thank you for being here tonight. I'm not kidding, I wish you were buying the plant. But on the Cimarron site and the other Oklahoma site, were you directly involved with those projects? The decommissioning of those projects as the nuclear person?
I wasn't directly involved with those, but
Okay.
I try to answer any questions you have about those.
I'm wondering when those projects started, and I know you said one was terminated, one wasn't, or if they're still in progress, like how long you've been working on them and what the total costs have been, and if there were unexpected problems that popped up in those projects, what were they? Thank you.
Just in general, several years. I mean, we're talking, I know the Cimarron project that we've been involved with it has been going on for the last 7 years or so, and it's nearing completion. The other project I referenced, it ended in the mid to late 2000s. I don't know how many years that went. I guess I'm not aware of any unexpected issues when you go into these types of sites, which were uranium or thorium production facilities. You expect certain conditions, especially in the case of the one where it was also a refinery prior to that. So you have an anticipation of the issues you're going to encounter. You understand the budgets that are available to address that, and you lay out a detailed plan to address those over a period of years. That's what we've done, from what I understand. You know, Scott State has presented here. That's what NorthStar intends to do as well. Yes, you run across a few things here and there, but typically not something that, well, I guess in our experience, that has been detrimental to the project.
But so in terms of the overall costs of each of those projects to date?
I would...
Ballpark?
Less than Vermont Yankee, more than tens of millions. So that's all the ballpark I can give you.
And have you been to the site? Have you, in terms of NorthStar's due diligence in structuring the sale, have you, as Burns and McDonnell, been there and looked at the site up to this point, or have you done any previous work at the VY site, like when they had all the water that they were shipping out that was not contained and kept flowing and we didn't know what was going on for a long time? Were you ever involved in any of that stuff?
So I've been to the Vermont Yankee site several times. We actually have one of our engineers there now who's supporting Holtec on the ISFSI project. I've got 25 years in nuclear power sites. I was also I was an evaluator for the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, so I got to tour many sites in the U.S. and some in Canada. I'm fairly familiar with the Vermont Yankee site from the walk downs and from the material I've been able to review, the documents.
But your company hasn't worked specifically for Entergy?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Oh, let me characterize that. Not in nuclear plants.
Okay, yes, because
we're doing rather
power
significant
lines and
something I didn't bring up for Entergy. We're doing a rather significant transmission distribution project for Entergy right now through another division.
I see. Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
I'm sorry, we're having this side conversation we shouldn't be doing. Does anyone else in the public have any questions? All right, thank you. Thank you, Glenn, very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate you, and Fred has left, but thank you both for coming. Quickly, I'm going to go over, at this point, our next meeting is scheduled for September 28th, which is a Thursday. And as I said, I'm going to just recap, and I know that people are going to send Commissioner Tierney some of the things, their ideas, and I've asked them to CC me as well so that we can coordinate the agenda. And those issue areas involve geotechnical experience about structures left in the ground, rubblization, and all of that. Issues surrounding the confidentiality agreement, both Chris and David Dean had issues about that. Senator McDonnell was asking about the structure of NorthStar, whether it's an LLC and all of that. And we had, Representative Dean also had a question about the settlement agreement and how that factors into the negotiations or whatever with the Public Service department and board. So I don't know if we can talk about all of those in September, but we'll make a schedule somehow to get it done, if we can. Does that sound okay to everybody? Yes.
That list is fine. And I had mentioned whether or not the panel wanted to take a position relative to advice to the agencies relative to their position before the Public Service Board in terms of classification of information as not public. Now, I know that things are ongoing, that you've made filings, et cetera, but I also heard in the discussions here today that this Public Service Board process is going to go on into the beginning of next year. And so it's suddenly burgeoned out in front of us. The original plan was for this to close prior to December of this year. And obviously, if the Public Service Board process is going to go on, that's not going to happen. And I want, and sort of what I'm asking us to consider, is to have a clear position on the part of the panel relative to the state agencies who will find themselves before the Public Service Board facing who knows what motions from NorthStar, Entergy, et al. And I'm sorry, that's a question about whether or not the panel would consider convening the Issues Committee to maybe put that on the agenda for the next meeting.
Yeah, and David Andrews and I spoke before this meeting that we're going to try to coordinate an Issues Committee meeting maybe next week, if we can get it together. So what we can do is talk about that, and then maybe the question, I think, is if we put this on our September 28th agenda, is that still enough time? And this is where the Commissioner Tierney would come in. If we were to meet as a panel on September 28th, talk about, do we as a panel want to do an advisory opinion or do a letter or whatever saying we think that the Public Service Department should, this is just a total made-up thing I'm about to say. If we want it totally on the record, it's made up. If we wanted to say to the Public Service Department, we don't think these documents should be confidential. If we were to say that to you on September 28th, is that too late? Or and we might say, make them confidential. Whatever we decide, is September 28th too late to say something?
There are two opportunities for a discussion about confidentiality in the case. One is in discovery and the other is in the case in chief. And by the case in chief, I mean the evidentiary hearings, where the actual record gets made before the Public Service Board in the hearing room. Any treatment of confidentiality before the board in the technical hearings is going to be at the time of the technical hearings. So in that sense, there's time for you to have this discussion in September, because the hearings, Rob, you might know, or Peter, you might know, but at this point I've lost track of when the hearings are going to be, and the attorney who can answer that question simply is not here tonight. Anyway, they're not in September, I don't think.
It was early October is when they were.
We're now thinking end of the year or early
Yeah.
2018.
Because it's been pushed out.
That's what I'm related to. And between now and then, who knows what kinds of motions you're going to face.
Well, I'm getting to the second part of my answer. Sorry, there's this frog in my throat. I've been fighting since January. And it's these late meetings. Anyway, The second piece, the discovery piece, I don't know what the discovery schedule is, but I want to be clear that whether these documents are treated as confidential is not a decision that belongs to the department. It's a decision that belongs to the board. The board's recent order, as I recall, has instructed all the parties to arrive at a protocol that will address the the company's assertion that there's a need for super secret treatment for 2 documents. And the department very vigorously, along with other parties in the case, A&R and the, who are you, Attorney General's office? There we go, yeah. Who happen to be on our team, vigorously fought to make sure that all parties are treated equally in terms of access under the super special protocol. As far as I know, the discussions to put that protocol together are underway. That is not going to wait until September. That's going to be decided. That protocol will be devised sooner and put before the board sooner than that. So in that sense, a discussion about whether NDCAP should weigh in on the confidential treatment of those 2 documents, and I'd like to emphasize it's 2 out of thousands. If you're going to do that, that probably cannot wait till September. Those 2 documents, I should add, are very, very, very important. They're the linchpin of the case, I think. And I certainly, as I said earlier, to be honest with you, Representative Dean, I respect that you wish to move the committee to a place where it takes an official position. What you've said tonight is already clear to me. I'm not sure what we're going to gain by having a conversation about this in September. It's pretty clear to me there are members on the NDCAP who feel very strongly about this. And as I've tried to express many times tonight, I don't take that lightly. I don't like the confidentiality piece myself, but I can't just wish it away either.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, so, and we are going to have, I'll let everybody know when we figure out when the issues committee is, so if anybody has any suggestions they want to put on the list.
Because in addition to the Public Service Board docket, we've also got, we should probably discuss whether or not we, as a panel, want to weigh in on the NRC hearing, and I'm not even sure what the timing is on that. But that's another, so we've kind of got 2, as far as 2 specific events that are going on. We've got the NRC and the PSB activities. So just for us to kick that around too.
Okay.
May I just make an observation? And Mr. Campany, when the senator's done, this is directed at you as well as anybody else. I've been to several of these meetings now since January, and I think I appreciate better what the dynamics on the panel are. And so I just want to make plain again that I appreciate the desire for the committee to take formal action, and I am respectful of the fact that you've been created as an advisory panel. But I urge you again to consider that the fact that you are here at these monthly meetings and the fact that I or one of my trusted representatives is here at those meetings and we hear what you say here, that in and of itself is advisory, at least to the department. And to the extent that you're engaged in activities to express a formal opinion about something, I think the efforts would be best directed to the board, because they're not here every month and they're not as available to you as I am by email, phone, drop in, send me not nice letters. I'm there for you.
I think both of us fully understand that we may not have to communicate to you, but if by getting a public organization to create a public record is informative to everybody that's out there.
The board, the NRC.
The board, the NRC, you know.
Yeah, I don't mean to make light at all and or to not suggest that it has no value. What I'm saying is you are already doing that as we are here tonight, this broadcast and the minutes. So I just wanted to underscore that point.
I will wait for
Yes,
your
any-
email.
All right. So September 28th will be our next meeting, and we hope it's going to be up in Brattleboro at the high school or the middle school, but we'll let everybody know. So before we adjourn, I want to make sure no one from the public has any last comments. No? Anyone on the panel have any last comments? I hope everybody enjoys July and August, and we'll reconvene in September. Would anyone like to make a motion to adjourn? I'm sure, and no one's going to vote against it, so we're adjourning.